Today's leading news stories, as reported by the IBA English News, focus on why Israel has snubbed former U.S. President Jimmy Carter's unsolicited visit to the area. Secondly, Israel is now using an American early warning radar system to protect her citizens from potential missile attacks by Syria and Iran. Finally, why are Israelis warned not to visit the Sinai Peninsula and its beautiful beaches during Passover this year? Stay tuned for these news stories and others along with my suggested prayer points so that you too can participate in Israel's historic and biblical cause.
Good evening and welcome to IBA News, coming to you from Jerusalem. In our top story, Israelis beware. The National Anti-Terror Bureau is warning holiday travelers not to visit the Sinai Peninsula over Passover and is calling on Israelis already there to return home. This following intelligence warnings of plans by terror groups to attack Israelis in the area. The warnings come amid reports that Hamas is demanding that the Egyptians open the Rafah crossing to allow Palestinian residents to cross into the Sinai. The Egyptian newspaper Al Aram is even reporting that Hamas may be planning to overrun the border between Gaza and the Sinai. According to the report, the operation will begin with a mortar barrage on Egyptian forces along the border. Afterwards, Hamas militants will fire on the Egyptian soldiers and then blow up some of the Egyptian outposts along the border fence with explosives planted in tunnels underneath the Philadelphia corridor. Meanwhile, former U.S. President Jimmy Carter said today he's been denied entrance into the Gaza Strip. Carter remained undeterred and took his peace mission to Ramallah, where he met with Palestinian Authority officials. He also planned to hold talks with Nasser Sha'er, who served as deputy prime minister in the Hamas-led government in 2006. Carter also remains determined to meet with Hamas political boss Khalid Mashal and Syrian President Bashar al-Assad when he travels to Damascus this week.
I'm going to try everything I can to get him to agree to peaceful resolution of differences, both with the Israelis through Gaza and also with the Fatah. But I'm not a negotiator. I'm just trying to understand different opinions and provide communications between people that won't communicate with each other. So I think that if he does have anything constructive to say, he or the president of Syria, Assad, then I would bring that to other people. I haven't been able to get permission to go into Gaza. I would like to. I asked for permission, but I was turned down. But maybe we can find a way to circumvent that. I don't know yet. I was in Sderot yesterday, and I don't approve of rockets being fired, that might very well hit civilians. And I don't approve of the killing of innocent people in Gaza either.
Another round has been fired in the war of words between Iran and Israel. The deputy commander of the Iranian army said today Israel would be eliminated from the global arena if it attacked Iran. Mohammad Ashtiani said Tehran was not worried by Israeli maneuvers. His comments came ahead of Iran's National Army Day on Thursday. Last week, Infrastructure Minister Benjamin Ben Eliezer warned that any Iranian attack against Israel would lead to the complete destruction of the Iranian nation. Meanwhile, the defense establishment has completed another test of its Arrow anti-missile system without actually firing the rocket itself. A demi-missile was launched as a target from an airplane over the Mediterranean to test the functioning of the Arrow's monitoring system, which tracks enemy rockets. The trial was also a test for the target missile itself, called Blue Anchor, which is meant to simulate a ballistic trajectory of advanced missiles possessed by regional powers. Defense officials are calling the test a total success. Israeli jets attacked a Qassam launching squad in the central Gaza Strip today. This after Palestinians fired anti-tank missiles and mortars at Israeli troops. There were no injuries to the soldiers. Overnight, Israeli warplanes fired missiles at a vehicle in the town of Beit Lahia, next to the Israeli border in northern Gaza, killing 42-year-old Ibrahim Abu Olba, a top commander in the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine terror group. The IDF said Olba was involved in a string of attacks against Israel and IDF soldiers, as well as infiltration attempts, and he was planning more. Knesset member Ahmed Tibi of the United Arab List met with the Emir of Qatar, Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani, at the Qatar conference in the country's capital, Doha. The two spoke about the Israeli-Palestinian peace process and the status of Israeli Arabs. Tibi sparked controversy when it was reported that he was attending the conference as an official representative of the Palestinian state. Tibi's spokeswoman said that he was invited as the Arab representative of the Knesset and that there was a mistake in the listing on the conference internet site. But Israel's Deputy Foreign Minister, Majali Wahabi, is still calling on the Knesset Ethics Committee to punish the MK for appearing as a Palestinian representative. Tibi was also the subject of controversy yesterday when he lashed out at Foreign Minister Tzipi Livni, who is also in Doha. Tibi said the foreign minister's claim that Israel is a democratic state happens to be false. He charged that Israel discriminates against its Arab citizens and carries out apartheid policies in the Palestinian territories. And meanwhile, Foreign Minister Livni met with the management of the Al Jazeera satellite television during her visit to the conference, this to protest their one-sided coverage of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Observers said the meeting was highly sensitive, as one of the owners of the station is the Prime Minister of Qatar. Foreign Ministry officials expressed satisfaction at the network's recent willingness to discuss its coverage of Israel. Nevertheless, the station did not make any reference to Livni's meeting with the Emir of Qatar, but did report on her talks with her counterpart from Oman. Well, it was 65 years ago this week that the brave Jewish resistance fighters of the Warsaw Ghetto rose up against the Nazis. Today, President Shimon Peres, along with his Polish counterpart, marked the event with a ceremony at the site of the Warsaw Ghetto Memorial. IBA's Eli Wogelenter has the story.
In a ceremony marking the 65th anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, President Shimon Peres joined Polish dignitaries today in a solemn program at the monument to the ghetto fighters. Peres laid a wreath at the memorial in the Polish capital, together with his counterpart, President Lech Kaczynski. "I bow my head before the slain and the survivors," Kaczynski said. 2 generations following the Holocaust, we must not forget what happened then and must prevent those kinds of events from ever happening again. Hundreds of students, Holocaust survivors, and dignitaries attended the event commemorating the uprising which took place on the night of the Passover Seder in 1943. Nazi officers had timed the destruction of the Warsaw Ghetto in what was supposed to have been a birthday present for Hitler the next day. The Jewish people would like to exact revenge, Peres noted today, but will do so by creating peace. He said that, quote, "During times of intifadas and uranium enrichment, it is through peace that the forces of light can avenge the actions of the forces of darkness." The crowd gathered beneath the stark granite monument to the heroes of the ghetto to listen to the ceremony, which included Poland's chief rabbi, Michael Szydrych, reciting the Kaddish. After the ceremony, Jews and Christians held prayer vigils at the site, and a Polish army officer read the names of Jewish resistance fighters who fell in the revolt. Eli Wogelenter, IBA News.
Joining me now from our Tel Aviv studio is Rabbi Yisrael Meir Lau, former chief rabbi of Israel, current chief rabbi of Tel Aviv, and a Holocaust survivor. Rabbi Lau, thank you for coming in.
Yeah.
President Shimon Peres said the time is right for strengthening ties between Israel and Poland. Would you agree? Rabbi Lau, can you hear me?
I didn't get your question.
All right. President Shimon Peres has said that the time is right for strengthening ties between Israel and Poland. Would you agree?
Look, there is a great difference between the first ceremony of uprising of Ghetto Warsaw, which took place 45 years ago. There was no Kaddish, there was no representative of Polish Jewry, and the word Jewish or Jews was almost not mentioned in the whole ceremony. Now, 65 years after the uprising, you see the President of the State of Israel is invited. The Rabbi of Poland, Rabbi Szydrych, is saying the Kaddish. It's a great difference. And last year, I must emphasize, the same President Lech Kaczynski have invited me to speak at the groundstone of a Jewish museum in Warsaw, not far from the ghetto, to tell the story of 1,000 Jewish settlement in Warsaw. We were there 3.5 million Jews, a population which had a great influence on the whole Polish population before World War II. So I think it's a great difference. We have to offer a hand and to cooperate.
Rabbi Lau, it's a great difference, as you say, but has Poland sufficiently rehabilitated itself for its role in the Holocaust?
I didn't get the question exactly, but I'm sure that the Polish authorities, they want to defeat anti-Semitism as it appears in Poland as in very many other lands, especially in Europe. I know that the fight anti-Semitism may be not enough. I'm sure that such a ceremony and the visit of President Peres there, they can help a little bit. Those deniers of Holocaust, they have an answer today. When the two presidents stand on the same place where the ghetto stood and was destroyed 65 years ago, I hope it is a good step in order of good understanding and cooperation.
Rabbi Lau, you yourself are a Holocaust survivor. What emotions did you experience when you heard President Peres address the crowd in Hebrew today?
I have only one remark. We celebrate now 60 years of the Israeli Jewish independence. I think all the time what would happen if this state would be established 10 years earlier, not on 1948, but on 1938, before World War II, before the story of Ghetto Warsaw. Maybe the history, I'm sure the history would have a different face.
Rabbi Yisrael Meir Lau, thank you for being with us this evening, and Chag Sameach.
Kashev Sameach, you are very welcome.
Thank you. Well, in other news today, the state is requesting that convicted M.K. Shlomo Ben Isri of Shas serve a sentence of 7 years in prison for bribery, fraud, and breach of trust. The state is also requesting that Ben Isri pay a large fine and be convicted of moral turpitude, which would force him to leave the Knesset. Ben Isri maintains his innocence and believes he will be acquitted on appeal. Defense Minister Ehud Barak visited the beleaguered southern town of Sderot today. During the tour, Barak said that Israel continue to allow the transportation of food and fuel into Gaza. He added that he hopes the energy supply will be used for the day-to-day needs of Gaza citizens and not for terror such as Qassam rocket fire on Israel. Barak was in the town for a cornerstone laying ceremony for the new plant of Elbit Systems, the Israeli Advanced Systems defense contractor. Well, whoever heads for the Sinai over the Passover holiday is gambling with his or her life. That's the word from the National Anti-Terror Bureau, splashed across today's Yediot Acharonot headlines. But according to the Israeli Travel Agent Union, some 5,000 young Israelis are still going to visit the Sinai despite the threats. 5,000 others canceled their trips. For those going, here are some tips offered by the Bureau. Don't identify as an Israeli where you don't have to. Always be on the alert. Don't open your hotel door for strangers. Be suspicious of strange objects. Don't accept unexpected invitations or gifts. Just how serious is the threat? Here to help answer the question is the former ambassador to Egypt, Tzvi Mazel. Tzvi, thanks for coming in this evening. What can you tell us about the intelligence behind these latest warnings?
Well, I don't know exactly what is behind it, practically. But I think that we should obey our authorities. They know what they are doing, absolutely. And what I know from my personal research about the problem is that there are a few groups in Sinai who would like to operate attacks against Israeli citizens in Sinai. This is really very dangerous. You have from one side, you have Hamas people who can easily cross the border under Philadelphia axis. And we know they did it only lately when they broke into Sinai 2 months ago. At least 30 Hamas people who were captured by the Egyptian, having with them explosive belts, weapons, whatever. They were arrested and put in prison, but they returned. They have been returned to Gaza. And then you have some groups of probably Bedouins who are connected. They are probably connected with some people or are being inspired by Al-Qaeda. You have people coming from Sudan, the Sudan border, you see. And only lately, 2 Sudanese with a truck of explosive was stopped and arrested by the authorities. So there is a real danger in Sinai, absolutely. It's very bad for us because our youngsters used to go there and it was really wonderful and nice. Even my daughter went there. But I think I completely agree with our authorities. We should be very, very careful. Absolutely.
There was a report in an Egyptian newspaper today that outlined a possible threat from Hamas blowing up the border fence once again, attacking Egyptian outposts and Egyptian soldiers. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I think it's a part of a psychological warfare between Hamas and Egypt. This information was published by Al-Aram. Al-Aram is a governmental paper, and it means that the government wanted the paper to publish it, and it can be constituted as a kind of a threat toward Hamas. Don't do it because we are ready. Don't repeat this breaking into Sinai like you did 2 months ago. We are ready to stop you. But we must understand that Egypt is now in a big dilemma, what to do. And it was said very clearly a few days ago by one of the officials. They said, we don't want to shoot on the Palestinians. They are our brothers, Palestinian brothers. We cannot shoot about it. But if they break in and we shoot, there will be a kind of a stain on our history. We wouldn't like to do it. If we don't shoot, our sovereignty and borders will be violated. So it's a big dilemma, and I think the Egyptians are trying to stop the Hamas from doing it by kind of speaking, threatening, and kind of diplomacy or whatever. This is the only way they can do before shooting.
Well, let's hope it's a peaceful Passover holiday here in Israel and for those elsewhere around the world.
Yeah, it will be a good Chamesin in Israel, so we can stay at home and enjoy.
Tzvi Mazel, former ambassador to Egypt, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And back to local news now. Attorney General Menachem Mezuz has decided not to appeal the Jerusalem court decision to allow the sale of chametz, leavened food items on the Passover holiday. Speaking at a discussion including representatives of the Interior Ministry and the Jerusalem municipality, Mezuz said the ruling does not set any new precedents and that it has been the position of the state over the years. Mezuz says the judge's interpretation allows the state to maintain its Jewish character without over-impinging on individual freedoms. Meanwhile, Shas Chairman Eli Yishai predicted that a law will be in place within 1 year's time forbidding the sale of chametz over the festival. The European Union and Israel signed onto the Euro-Mediterranean Agreement, strengthening ties between European communities and neighboring countries. The pact will increase Israel's participation in EU programs.
It's a great pleasure for me that we are about to sign the agreement today, which has got a very elaborate title, but in short terms enables our partner Israel to cooperate in community programs.
This is only a beginning. Now the challenge is for Israel and for the EU to implement as soon as possible the opportunity that has opened with the signing of this agreement.
Italy's Silvio Berlusconi said he will waste no time in tackling his country's long-simmering economic and social problems. The 71-year-old media baron won an impressive election victory and will occupy the prime minister's seat for the third time. Berlusconi vowed to crack down on crime, close the border to illegal immigrants, and reduce unemployment among the youth. Voters shun the far left, and for the first time in recent memory, Italy will not have a communist or socialist lawmaker in the parliament. However, someone who will be sitting in the House of Deputies as a member of Berlusconi's People of Freedom Party is Fiamma Nierenstein, a part-time Israeli resident and close confidant of Berlusconi. I spoke with her by telephone a short time ago.
Yes, there are plenty of problems, but I think that he has got such a majority that at the end of the day, it will be much easier today to solve them, also because of his good intentions. Of course, I believe that they are good intentions about all kinds of problems, from foreign policy to taxation, to the rights of the families, and many big initiatives that will take place and that he announced in his campaign. But most of all, what gives him the power will be stability. We will have stability in Italy. You know, there is everybody says that Italy never has longer than 2 or 3 years government. This time, because of the numbers, it looks like the government will be very stable and it will have a longer time to solve all of these difficult problems we have here.
Can we expect to see ties between Italy and Israel growing stronger in the coming days?
Absolutely. You know that Berlusconi has repeated several times in his campaign that his first trip as a prime minister will be to Israel, just to participate in the festivities for the 60th anniversary of Israel. And he praised Israel many times as a strong defender of the Western values and the great combatant in the war against the terrorism. He was very explicit and very straight in saying this, without any other. He didn't speak about anything else when he didn't speak much about foreign policy. But the subject of Israel was raised several times and always in very positive terms.
The town of Holon is undergoing a green revolution. It's not really an environmental turnaround. It's the city's bushes and trees, which are being magically transformed into teddy bears, castles, and other delightful figures. IBA's Jonathan Elkins explains.
If you live in Holon, you might have noticed that something strange is afoot in this sleepy town, on the side of the roads, on traffic islands, in public parks. It's all the handiwork of Holon's official gardener, Eli Edry. This arboretum artist says that when he looks at a bush or a tree, it's not just the vegetation that he sees, it's a person, a snail, a giraffe, or an elephant. He's been called Holon's local Edward Scissorhands. Eli says he started out as a cook, where he would make sculptures out of vegetables, butter, or ice to use as centerpieces for his tables. This creative gardener says it took him 1.5 years to clip this teddy bear's smile to face oncoming traffic. These pagodas are still under construction, and this Mexican is taking a siesta in the hot Holon sun. Eli says he was inspired by a toy sombrero in his house. Meanwhile, Holon has plenty more brush waiting for their gardener's artistic touch. Jonathan Elkins, IBA News.
Stock Talk now. Share prices on the Tel Aviv exchange were mixed today, and there was a further strengthening of the shekel in foreign currency trading. Let's look at the late afternoon numbers. Relief is on the way. IBA weather guy says the heat wave will break. We'd expect cooler temperatures tonight and tomorrow. That's all for today. Thanks for watching, and shalom from Jerusalem.
Shalom and welcome to each of you. Now let's take a moment to consider what we heard and saw on today's news from Israel in the light of the book of books, the Bible. After all, Jesus said heaven and earth would pass away, but my words will never pass away. It seems that former U.S. President Jimmy Carter, although likely well-meaning in his own way, seems to always irritate more than comfort Israel. His book calling Israel an apartheid state did not help. All major leaders in Israel have refused to meet with him, with the exception of President Peres. Carter was originally planning to visit with the elders, a group of senior officials such as former Irish President Mary Robinson, Bishop Desmond Tutu of South Africa, and former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan. However, their trip was scuttled mainly because of problems with for getting the group into Gaza, due of course to security concerns for their personal safety. Carter will continue on to Syria And there in Damascus meet Khalid Mashal, the exiled Damascus leader, Hamas leader, who refuses to acknowledge Israel's right to exist and continues to call for Israel's destruction. It is a lose-lose situation, as even Condoleezza Rice, the U.S. Secretary of State, has asked Carter to refrain from meeting with Mashal. The Bible says, "The Lord brings the counsel of the nations to nothing. He makes the plans of the peoples of no effect." Psalm 33, 10 and 11. A recent poll in Israel has shown that Israelis are stressed over Iran's end run for nuclear capability. Now, one essential component of any nuclear arms program is a delivery system, that is, missiles. And Israel knows that, and now they have asked for an American early warning radar detection system coupled with interceptor missiles, which will destroy the incoming rockets before they get near the Israeli population centers. This technology, however, is not fail-safe. But here's what is fail-safe: Israel's best security promises. "Behold, he who keeps Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps." Psalm 121, verse 3. And secondly, "no weapon that is formed against you, Israel, will prosper." Isaiah 54, 17. Now, every year, Israelis love to celebrate Passover near where it all began, in the Sinai Desert with its white sandy beaches on the edge of the Red Sea. Now it seems that Jews are not free to celebrate their festival of freedom there, even where they want. Israeli security officials have warned that the latest intelligence reports that they've received require all Israelis to return home immediately from the Sinai Peninsula. 5,000 have canceled their proposed journey, but another 5,000 are still there, and we don't know what's going to happen with them. New tunnels. The reason for this concern is that new tunnels have been found at the Rafah crossing from Gaza into Egypt, and Egyptian officials, police, have captured 30 people, all with suicide bomber belts. Al-Qaeda is using some Bedouins there in the Sinai to strike at Jewish targets. Also, 2 Sudanese carrying explosives were reportedly picked up in the Sinai with explosives. It's indeed worrying, as the primary targets of such terrorists in the past were always Israeli citizens. Even Israeli embassies and consulates and institutions worldwide are on a high alert. Nevertheless, Israel will be celebrating Passover this Saturday evening. It's estimated that 95% of Israelis will be attending a traditional Passover meal. Passover is the biggest annual celebration in the Jewish calendar year, and as they've said from generation to generation, next year in Jerusalem. Now, bearing in mind these stories, let's go to the Lord in prayer. Please, would you out there pray for Israel's leadership to be strong in the face of all kinds of international pressures to compromise. Secondly, let's pray for Israel's protection against those who plan her destruction, that these evil plans will come to nothing. And thirdly, please pray for Israelis to be safe everywhere in the world as they celebrate their freedom from Egyptian slavery and bondage more than 3,000 years ago. And finally, pray for the peace of Jerusalem. They shall prosper who love her. Psalm 122, verse 6. Well, dear friends, that's it for today. Write in your questions and comments. We'd love to hear from you at comments@israelvision.tv. I repeat, comments@israelvision.tv. And I want to leave you with this word of wisdom from the Bible. Confess your faults to one another, your slips, your false steps, your offenses, your sins, and pray for one another, that you may be healed and restored. The earnest, heartfelt prayer of a righteous man or woman makes tremendous power available. It becomes dynamic in its working. This is James 5:15. So we'll see you tomorrow. Please do take care, and shalom from Jerusalem.